For those of you who have been attending a number of presentations this morning, I'd just like to tell you outside is absolutely glorious. So hopefully you'll have a really nice journey home. Before we start, we're going to be talking about compliance legislation, health and safety. Unlike most of the people in this room, I get quite excited about that. Why is that funny? And when I get excited, I tend to talk quite quick. So if you find that I'm talking a little bit too quick, if you could just listen a bit quicker, hopefully we'll be able to catch up. So as a means of introduction, my name's Andy Ball. I'm a co-founder of a company called I Am Compliant. Fellow co-founder is Luke. If you've ever met Luke, he's worse than me. He's just hyper all the time. We set up I Am Compliant about 12, 13 years ago. And it was at the point where schools were moving away from local authority to academy status. And in the past, the local authority was looking after the schools. And then when you went to academy status, you found all those legislation, all those fire alarm checks, all those fire extinguisher checks were all down to you. And nobody in the school basically knew anything about it. People didn't go to university to study as a teacher, for example, or a head teacher, to learn about how to maintain a fire extinguisher on a monthly basis. So there was a gap there. So what we did was we produced I Am Compliant. It's an aid, particularly for those that might not know everything there is to know about compliance, and who does at the end of the day. The world has changed. The caretaker back in them days would sweep leaves, close the school gates, and make sure the boiler was up and running every winter period. They've now been replaced by site managers who have to have an in-depth knowledge of health and safety, legislation and compliance in general. And for the school business managers amongst you, that's exactly the same for you. So you're in a world that maybe you didn't want to be in, you're in it. You're not getting paid any more for this new experience and all these added tasks that you're responsible for, but you're in that world. So hopefully I Am can help you. One thing I found throughout my life, and I started off, joined the army when I was 16, so I'd done 24 years man and boy. I left that and moved into facilities management. And I found that whatever I did in life, whether it's organising a kid's birthday party, if you break things down into small bite-sized chunks, you can manage it. If you look at things as they stand at the moment, it's just far too big. And because it's far too big, invariably, if you were like me back in the day, you ended up doing absolutely nothing. So no progress was ever made. So I'm going to look through, to start with, compliance tasks. Now, compliance tasks, if you're a primary school, for example, you will have roughly about 60 compliance tasks to complete, whether they be weekly Legionella checks, or whether they be annual servicing of things. If you're in a secondary school, that's going to extend and go up to 100 tasks. And that's just your compliance. That's ignoring the teachers that complain about shelves falling off the walls and doors that don't open properly. So as a rough idea, hopefully, this should ring a bit of a bell to you all. So this is your in tray, compliance-wise. Come in on a Monday morning, you're all happy, you haven't even drunk your first coffee, you've been hit with your compliance checks for the year ahead, and it looks pretty daunting. And there's a lot there. A lot of it is the fact that maybe you don't know what those checks are, or the fact that maybe you don't know you should be doing those checks in the first place, because a lot of the stuff is hereditary. With I Am, we've got a solution to that. You tell I Am you've got an emergency light, and I Am will tell you all the tasks associated with the emergency light check, or the aircon unit, or the fire door check, or the fire alarm system, whatever the case may be. So that's how you can enhance your knowledge. That's too much for us to do in this short period of time that we've got available to us. So what we want to do is approach it by breaking things down. We call that the slice of cake, or the piece of cake. So imagine it's your birthday. Congratulations. We won't tell you how old you are. Massive big cake. You're going to eat it all at some point, but you're not going to eat it all just now. You're going to cut it up. You're going to take cake, piece of cake, bit by bit. And that's what we're going to do with our compliance. And the first thing that we want to do with our compliance is we want to break it down so that we have our competent tasks. That's the tasks that we can do in-house, compared to the contractor tasks. That's the tasks, obviously, that you need to get specialists in or qualified people in. So when you break your competent tasks down, the list becomes a little bit smaller. So those in the left, on the black, are the competent. Those on the right are the contractor tasks. So it's worked out roughly, for those quick-witted amongst you, about two-thirds. Two-thirds of the tasks are stuff that we can do. A third of the tasks is the contractor tasks. I'm not interested in the contractor tasks, because as you know, you probably haven't just gone through the summer that never was. Contractors generally come in the summer or the Easter period, because that's your longest breaks. So we know we're at least a couple of months away from worrying about the contractor tasks. So let's not worry about them at all at this stage. So all we're interested in is our competent tasks, which equate to 39 in this case. So that's what our cake looks like now. We've taken a big slice out of it. We're going to have that bit later on. But these are the tasks that we're interested in at the moment. What I now want to do is I want to group those tasks and put them in some form of priority. So my 39 tasks, as were, the second cut of the cake, or as Rod Stewart, playing Glastonbury this year, once said, the first cut, breaks it down, and I'm going to break it down into 4 categories. I'm going to call it fire, asbestos, Legionella, and then miscellaneous, all the odds and sods. So within the fire bracket, we have a number of tasks. So remember, we've started with 41. We're whittling it down now into these categories. Asbestos, depending on what your asbestos survey comes up with and what your asbestos management plan dictates, it could be a bit more extensive than that. But hopefully in schools nowadays, asbestos is really down to a minimum, and you shouldn't have anything more than having to check it on an annual basis, hopefully. Legionella, quite a lot involved in Legionella. A lot of you will have people outsourcing that, and you'll get qualified people coming in just to test the temperatures on your Sentinel taps, etc. But as a minimum, you're going to have to run your infrequently used outlets on a weekly basis. And then our miscellaneous, things like radon. Love talking about radon because nobody seems to know anything about it. Radon is the second highest cause of lung cancer in the UK. And radon is a radioactive waste that comes out of uranium that's in the ground. And you can look at a map, a UK radon website, look at the map of the UK, and if you're living in a brown area, anyone from Cornwall here by any chance? Oh dear, that's a really bad area. Those most up north tend to be outside the radon area. But just so you're aware, the HSC now are starting to play on radon quite a bit because people just don't know what it is. So it's a radioactive gas that comes out of the ground, and it's a bit like asbestos. You can manage it. Where my last school, it was a private girls' school in Bruton, I actually had a well dug underneath my office to allow the gas to escape into it, and then an extractor fan took the gas out. You have radon in your house, but it's very, very small, so you don't have to worry about it. Now that I've scared everyone about radon, if we look now at that group that we've just got, we can divide that piece of cake now and just select one of those groups. That priority is entirely up to yourself. My priority was always fire. That was my worst nightmare. The last thing I wanted to have was a drama with fire in the school. So any money that I had spare always went into fire resources. So as far as my second cut's concerned, I've now whittled my original list of 60 tasks down to just a dozen. Does everyone see where this is going? No feedback, falling asleep, can't tell who's awake or not because the lights are in my eyes. So what we now do is we start prioritizing those tasks, and out of that list of a dozen things, let's break them down nice and simply into weekly tasks, monthly tasks, annual tasks, and periodic. You can see how we've now diluted that original list all the way down. Out of all those tasks, our priority has to be the task that is due immediately or very soon, and that's going to be the weekly task. The monthly task, because we're at the start of February, I've got a whole month to complete that task, so that's down my priority list. Things that are happening on an annual basis, I can put that off until the summer. There's no drama there, because we all know during the summer holidays, we have lots of spare time and nothing happens in the school. Or at least that's what the majority of teachers seem to think. Or we've got a villa in the Bahamas somewhere. God knows where that one come from. And then we've got our periodics, for example, our fire evacuation drill. So let's whittle it down. There's our piece of cake now. You can see how we've managed to divide it up. We're just left with a nice, small, manageable size that we can take in one go. And in this case, because we've chosen our weekly tasks as our priority, I've only got 4 tasks. My head now is a lot clearer because there was too much whiskey last night, but it's definitely clearer now. I've whittled that down from my 60 tasks down to 4 tasks that become my immediate concern. So my only worry today is to make sure that this week I've got those 4 tasks done. Again, those that are quick-witted amongst you, you'll realise that all those tasks actually relate to the fire alarm check on a weekly basis. So every week, you set off a call point. When you set the call point off, your roller shutters in the kitchen will all drop down. Shoo, sound effect. Your door entry systems will automatically unlock, and your door closing devices, automatic door releases, will automatically close all the doors. So actually, it's 1 task, although it's down there as 4. Just an interesting thing on that, your door entry system, that's your key fobs or your keypads or whatever. Back in the day, they used to all be related to the fire alarm. Nowadays, because of safeguarding issues, you tend to find that it's a standalone and they're no longer related or linked to the fire alarm. The reason being is, if I want to gain access to a school, all I've got to do is set the fire alarm off and all the main doors open for me. So those days have changed, but the test is basically still the same. As we've got all those tasks, again, we give it to the site manager, carries that out on, say, a Wednesday morning, 8 o'clock. Within half an hour, those 4 tasks are done. I can sit back, enjoy a cup of tea and a chocolate hobnob. Next task, obviously, will be our monthlies. You repeat the process for your Legionella. So your Legionella basically is quite simple because your only weekly task is your infrequent outlets, your weekly flushings. The only drama chameleon, as Boy George once said, the only drama with that is obviously in the summer or during breaks, every single water outlet in the school becomes an infrequent outlet. Particularly bad in the summer because that's hopefully where you get your warm weather. So because the taps aren't getting used, you have to go around, you have to flush them yourself. For those of you that remember COVID, don't we all? Do you remember reading the legislation every night? Because it just kept changing all the time, see what you had, what you could and couldn't do. You removed all the stuffed toys and everything out of the prep school, and then 2 days later, you're allowed to put them all back. But during COVID, the biggest problem for me at the school wasn't COVID, it was Legionella. Because all of a sudden, I had 600 pupils missing in a boarding school. The showers weren't getting used on a daily basis. And the massive big water tanks that I had in the attic had to get flushed through on a frequent basis. Otherwise, Legionella became a big problem for me. So that's our aspect as far as Legionella is concerned. Asbestos, as I said, depends really on your asbestos management plan and the information that you can gain from there. But basically, you're going to have a review of your ACMs, and then you'll do a check of them as well. We've got rid of all the worst type of asbestos in the school, hopefully, a good 15 years ago. So your asbestos checks generally now are down to about once a year. Then we've got our odds and sods. If you're lucky enough still to have a swimming pool, for example, again, the amount of tasks that you've got in that swimming pool depend on your SOP and what you've managed to pull out from that. I had an outdoor pool, which caused a number of problems, but indoor swimming pools also have their own problems because you're then talking about environmental. Radon being your big one, and then of course you've got PAT testing. Don't get me going on PAT testing. You got me going on PAT testing. So everyone, for some reason, seems to think you have to do PAT testing every year. Let me just very quickly explain PAT testing and how that works. So PAT testing, anyone remember the days of the big metal kettle where you had a massive big plug that you'd plug in? And if you were really posh, you had a red switch on the kettle that you could switch the kettle on and off. If not, you just plugged this thing in, it didn't switch itself off, it just kept going. So back in the day, you had a lot of items that were made out of metal. And the problem with that is, if a wire became loose, it would touch the metal part of whatever the appliance was, say the kettle in this case. People would then pick up the kettle, make a cup of tea, and have a chocolate hobnob, and get an electric shock. So appliances need to be tested on a regular basis to make sure that they're in a worthy condition. Legally, you don't have to PAT test. The actual process of PAT testing isn't a legal requirement. Legally, most of the stuff that you've seen on the screen in the last 10 minutes, legally you don't have to do. You don't have to do a core point weekly test. That's not a legal requirement. The legal requirement from the legislation is you have to have a system of maintenance in place and ensure that the equipment is safe and workable. The solution to that, if you like, the guidance, is the core point. So back to our PAT testing. So we came up with the PAT test. There's a lot of electricians in the UK driving around in top-of-the-range Mercedes at the moment, because they would come in and they would test every single appliance you've got, charge you £1 for that, spend a couple of days at the school, put loads of labels on all the appliance, so you've got a label on a label on a label on a label, massive big thick things, and then pass everything ultimately at the end of the day. There's a thing called double insulation. And if you have an appliance, if you look at the appliance where normally you get like the serial number or the little manufacturer's detail, if you look carefully on the back of that appliance, if you see a square within a square, that means it's double insulated. Double insulated means that if that wire becomes loose, it's contained within an insulated box, plastic box normally. It's no longer touching the metal part of the kettle. So because it's double insulated, it's uber safe. There's no requirement to do PAT testing on a double insulated appliance. Ever. Not at all. You're gonna call my bluff now. You're gonna start looking at the HSE website. Go for it. Look at the HSE website. You do not have to test any appliance that is double insulated inside. This has been recorded. HSE can sue me if they want, but it's them that told us that. What you still have to do is you still need to inspect them, though, to make sure that the cable's not frayed, make sure the plug's still in a good condition. But you don't have to test it. So if you look at the 1,000 of appliances that you're getting tested every year, and you actually look at them and see if any of them are double insulated, roughly about a third to a half will be double insulated. So you don't need to test them. I've just saved you £300 to £500 there. What you can do on portable appliances, if they're not double insulated, you can do an assessment to see how often you feel they need to be tested. So, for example, a non-double insulated photocopier is less risky than a non-double insulated hairdryer, for example, because the photocopier is left in the same place. You know that if you've ever pulled a photocopier out, you know how long they've been in there, because there's a load of stuff underneath. So you can do that test now on a 2-yearly or 3-yearly basis. It doesn't have to be every year. If you look at all your electrical appliances and you get your Excel spreadsheet out, you put all those appliances on, you do your assessment, you come up with a plan, it will save you a few £100 a year. The problem, of course, is the one thing can't give you and money can't buy is time. You just don't have the time to sit down and be able to do that. That said, when you get your electrician out, they should produce a list for you anyway, so half of the workload should be done for you. So you can get away with doing pat testing 2 years, 3 years, even 5 years. It's entirely up to yourself. So you can get through all those tasks either by applying a little bit of common sense, doing your own risk assessment, and then whittling all those tasks down. So it can be a lot less than what you started off with. When you look at a general plan of how things go, these are all our tasks as far as our competent tasks concerned. Let me go back one. And we can stagger that out over a period of time. Never, despite what your site manager tells you, never have any tasks scheduled for a Monday. It's Manic Monday. So when you come in on a Monday, that's when all of a sudden the rats have invaded, or things have fallen off, or the boiler's not working, or lights aren't working. Manic Monday is never a good day to do compliance checks. I always had Friday as a free day as well. That was my admin day. I could just walk around the school and just chat to people. Just quite nice. But also, 6 times a year, there's bank holidays, and they invariably fall on a Monday and a Friday. So if you've got something scheduled in for a Monday, and you're religious to make sure that that is done every Monday, you're going to have a very upset site manager who's driven all the way back from Torquay in his static caravan to come and do the checks that you've allocated for the Monday. So try and keep everything contained within Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of the week. And ideally, if you can, schedule them in for the later part of the week, because you can do it on the Tuesday and just record it as being done that week. It gives you that little bit of flexibility in doing things. So our cake, cutting the cake, if you remember at the start, we divided it between competent and contractor tasks. So those 60 tasks were divided, worked out around about a third, 2/3 split. We then put them into categories and we selected our highest priority. Personally, I opted for fire because that's my thing. And then from there, you work out the frequency that you've got to do the tasks. Weekly being your priority, obviously, because that's got to happen this week. Things like annual, we're not worried about. We've got a whole 10 months to be able to carry out those tasks. So that is basically my philosophy of life. I've put it under the guise of compliance. But if you apply that to anything, to be honest, then it should serve you in good stead. Break everything down. If you look at the big picture, it will be an absolute nightmare. Sometimes you have to stand away and take a little bit of that just to be able to get through. Now, as I said at the start of the presentation, I served in the army, 24-year man and boy. Health and safety in the army back in the day when I joined was a little bit weird, to say the least. So we were quite happy going out on the ranges, firing big guns, small guns, any gun, didn't matter, it was fun. But we didn't have any ear protection at the time. Well, we did, we had like little rubber grommets, which had been proven not to work too well. So to that extent, I'm as deaf as a dodo. I don't know if that's a proper term. But if there is any questions, feel free to shout out quite loud. And if need be, Tracy will relay the messages to me. Anybody got any questions? Relevant. Go for it. I can't see anyone, sorry.
What's your recommendation on recording the administration side of making sure that you can demonstrate that you've done all of these compliance checks?
Electronically, without a shadow of a doubt. Paperwork just involves too much time. So I always gauged a good site manager on their folders. You'd walk in the site office. Back in the day, it wasn't a site office, it was just a boiler room. And if they had nice color-coded folders with all the labels at the right length, and they'd gone to the effort of printing out those labels rather than just writing, that to me was a good site manager. When you then ask them for the information, you've then got to trawl across all those different folders. So you might have a folder on fire alarm weekly check, but any remedial relating to the call points might be in another folder, so you're constantly cross-referencing. The advantage with an electronic system And it's not just IAM, there's other systems out there as well. Some of you use Every, for example. So there are systems available to you. But the advantage with that is you've got it all at the comfort of your desk. So while you're supping your cup of tea and having your chocolate hobnob, that information is displayed on the screen. Not only that, but electronic systems also. IAM works brilliant on a smartphone. Site staff absolutely love it on a smartphone. So you could be sat on the number 9 bus on the way to school in the morning, and you could just have a quick look and see where your compliance rating is, see what jobs you've got left to do for this week, whatever the case may be. People like the HSC absolutely love electronic versions. And I remember I was working with a school in North Somerset, and the fire officer decided he would pay a visit. So me and the bursar and the head teacher cleared out an office, put all the books relevant on the table, and he occupied for the best part of the day, me, the bursar, and the head teacher, while they went through all the records. Asking about a record, we'd have to try and find it in amongst all these books. At the end of the day, he said, "That's me, I'm finished now." I said, "Oh, good, thank God for that. Can we have a quick walk around the school? And can you, like, point out anything that might be wrong that maybe I've missed that we can work on or whatever?" Because that's what I wanted. I wanted a man with the qualification of a fire officer to walk around and tell me that isn't a good thing, or that's a really good thing, or whatever the case may be. Instead, he spent all day in the office tying up 2 valuable and me, members of the staff, looking at books. The advantage you've got with electronic system is the person that wants to look at your records, you can give them access to your system, and they don't even have to come into the school. They can do it for the comfort of their own home. There's an environmental thing going on there. But more importantly than the environmental aspect is the fact they're not coming in and drinking your tea and coffee and eating your chocolate hobnobs. That's the important bit of the whole thing. So they can, from the comfort of their own home, see what's going on, make any recommendations, and then hopefully they'll spend a day where they tour a number of schools and actually give you some on-site advice. That was an extremely long-winded answer to your question, but I'm stalling for time, hoping there's no others, because that's the only answer I know. But did I answer your question?
You did, thank you.
Excellent. If I know the answer, please ask the question. If I don't even put your hand up. Go for it.
You've shown us what you can do. Is there a way of having a small demo of what's on offer?
Absolutely. Of IAM. I'd love to give you a demo now, but I don't know how all this is worked out. But if you like to come see myself or Tracy at the end, we can take your email address and a member of the team will get in touch with you and you can have an online demo. Online demos are good because you can tell them what your problems are. So it's not a preachy sales type thing. It's these are the problems I'm experiencing. I've got a mat, I've got 20 schools in the mat or 10 schools in the mat. I don't know how to manage them all. The caretakers are all doing their own thing. How can we standardize it? So yeah, if you'd like to give us your email address, we can arrange for, at your convenience, we can arrange for an online sesh. And the advantage with that is you can invite whoever you want to it. So you can have all the site managers, head teacher can get involved if you want. There's a lot of small primary schools out there that don't have the luxury of site teams. And it's the head teacher and the teaching staff and school business manager who's actually going around doing all these checks. As far as IAM's concerned, IAM has how-to guides on how to carry out checks. So if you're unsure, if also you get contractors that come in and say, "Here," because they talk like that, "Here, legally you should be doing this." IAM's got a link to the government website which pulls up the regulation or the legislation applicable to the task. So you can look through that and you can say, where on there does it say, I need 400 fire extinguishers? If anyone buys fire extinguishers from Chubb, or you have Chubb servicing your fire extinguishers, you'll have a lot of fire extinguishers, trust me, because that's a upsell. That's how they make the money. They don't make it on the service contract, they make it on the upload. Shouldn't knock another company, but I did, so it doesn't matter. It's gone now, and it's all recorded. Equally, did I answer your question? Excellent, thank you. Anything else about compliance in general, or excellent. As anyone will tell you, there is no other biscuit available other than Hobnobs. I actually, when people signed up, I wanted to send people packets of Hobnobs, but marketing just seemed that as a complete waste of time. Don't know why. Sorry, you put your hand up. Who was it?
Yeah, it's a question about, if you've got, say, a 2 or 3-storey building, must you have an evac chair or a call system in between to get somebody out?
Not necessarily, so that depends on your peeps. So in normally, if I can use that term, normally no, it'll be fine. If you put peeps into effect though, and the interesting thing about peeps is people think that peeps just applies to disabled people. It's not, it's less able-bodied people. And there's a significant difference there because all of a sudden Mrs. Jones had a great Christmas and now she's pregnant. She now becomes less able-bodied. So in the event of a fire, how do we get Mrs. Jones out of the top floor all the way through? There's things you can do to save yourself a bit of money so you don't have to buy vac chairs, for example. Mrs. Jones has a new classroom and it's on the ground floor by the door, for example. But it's really dependent on peeps, absolutely. And it's the same with refuge areas. Has anyone got a refuge area in the school?
We've got a refuge call point that isn't used or we don't even know where it goes to.
Oh, right.
That's definitely a thing we've got.
Yeah, we have, yeah. And it doesn't, I don't even think it really worked. Well, we did test it, it did work actually. But
So what is it, a telephone or an intercom system?
it was a telephone, we've taken the telephone out.
Oh, right, wow.
Because it just used to get played with by the kids and it just used to be damaged 90%.
Ah, cool. Again, a lot of that comes down to your fire risk assessment. Your fire risk assessment is going to dictate what you need and what you don't do. Or ideally a fire survey, there's a difference. So ideally get a fire survey done, because you can write your own fire risk assessment, but get a fire survey done and they'll say, look, you have a number of less able-bodied people in the school. You need to have an area of refuge for them. If that's the case, and you've got a problem with people breaking it, that becomes a different problem. I don't think the solution would be to remove the refuge area. That wouldn't be a good thing. For anyone that goes to Bristol and goes to We the Curious, used to be called At Bristol. It's like a science park in the middle of Bristol. The way they do their fire evacuation is everyone heads to the stairwells which flank the building. The stairwell, so a refuge area, for those that might not know, a refuge area is fire safe. So you're guaranteed a minimum of 30 minutes fireproofing. So it's all immaculate. So We the Curious have their stairwells are 30-minute fireproof with the fire doors and everything else. And basically what happens is when the place is evacuated, when the fire alarm goes off, everyone goes to the stairwells. The marshals go to the stairwells and they evacuate the building, starting with the lower floor. So the lower floor fire marshal will take people out the building. The next floor then is clear to walk through and all the way down. So there's quite a lot of thought gone into that because quite a lot of people can attend. But you need to look at your fire risk assessment, need to look at PEEPs definitely, if that's the case. And PEEPs should be a live thing anyway. So things change. Somebody might have been playing rugby at the weekend, scored a goal, clearly weren't playing for Wales, but might have, apologies to anyone that's Welsh, but might have broken a leg and all of a sudden they become less able-bodied, and you need to consider those. It needs to be constantly there in your mind. Fire was my worst nightmare, absolute worst nightmare, constantly. What I used...
We had evac chairs, but no one's trained to use them because the staff that did left and they just sat there, so
Oh, right, yeah. Well,
no point in having them if no one can use them or we can train.
yeah, I mean, you can get people that can come in. It depends on what level of training you need to do, because a lot of it is competent. And competence just a funny sort of term, full stop. So competent, basically, you can gain competency through experience of just the amount of times you've done something. So there's a lot of stuff that you can see, dare I say, on the internet, where you can get training. Your evac chair should have come with instructions as well. The companies normally we'll provide a video online for any sort of training. And it's just a case of making sure that people actually go through that process. That's the difficult bit, because it's a time-consuming thing, isn't it? Just getting everyone to go through, and who's going to sit in the chair while you roll it down the stairs. Not a lot of volunteers on that. But yeah, it's an ever-changing, Peeps ever-changing, and keep your eye on it. Well, one thing, a top tip, if you like, or a tip, might not be the top tip, but it's certainly a tip. What I used to do was I used to have, throughout the year, I'd have seasons, if you like. I'd have like half a term where it would be purely concentrating on fire. So I'd get all my fire checks done. I'd do my review of the fire risk assessment. I'd go around, do a survey with the chair governors, do all the bits and pieces. The headmistress would assembly. She would give a talk about fire awareness, telling the girls, because it's a private girls' school, telling the girls why we shouldn't be holding doors open, why we shouldn't be leaving bags in corridors. And it might not have changed the world, but in that short period of time, all 700-800 members of the school community were focused on fire. So you walked around, there wasn't any fire extinguishers holding open the doors. There wasn't loads of bags in. Come the next half term, it all changed. When I started concentrating on Legionella, it all went back to normal. But at least people were aware of what was going on during that time. Unfortunately, I've come to the end of my time, but I know there's no more questions. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time to spend time with me. And if you'd like to have a chat with me, I'm downstairs. And also, if you'd like a demo, please give your email address to Tracy. Thank you.